So when you say, well, gee, the wealthy can't support a higher tax rate, well, instead what's happened is that the wealthier citizens of this state, we're supposed to be concerned about how much they're paying, but we never seem to hear about how much more the middle class and the working class are paying for services that we all understand are necessary parts of public education. We're paying that, at the point of service, and let's calculate that, put all those numbers together, and then look at what the tax load is on the entire spectrum of taxpayers in the state. And I think you would find that it is not true that 1% of the taxpayers is paying that much.
Well, first of all,
because it's being spread. They're not paying. They're instead shoving the cost down all the way down to the least well-heeled people.
The hidden costs.
Yeah, but I want to be real
They're
clear.
not so hidden.
I want to be real clear. I don't want you to put words in my mouth. I didn't say the wealthy can't shoulder the burden they have. My point is you have to recognize human nature. The wealthy are leaving the state. Bill Foley took Fidelity National Financial out of California. Tiger Woods grew up in this state. What did Tiger Woods do right before he turned pro and signed a $40 million contract with Nike? He left California. Where did he go? To Florida, because there's no income tax. Venus and Serena Williams grew up in Compton. They don't live in California today. Why? Because 9.3 at the time, it's now 10.3% of $1 million is a lot of money. It's not that if you built a wall around California and you told the rich you can't leave, that would be one thing. But we have people who move. Human behavior is exactly what it is. In 1991, Pete Wilson proposed and the legislature enacted a bunker fuel tax. Doubled the bunker fuel tax. Now, I was in the legislature, didn't vote for it, didn't know what bunker fuel was.
What is a bunker fuel?
Bunker fuel is what ships use. You know what, these big tankers, I learned something. They can go around the world twice without refueling. We doubled the tax on bunker fuel. You know what happened? We ended up with less revenue than we had before. In fact, we ended up with no revenue because these ships, the captains and the ship owners changed their behavior. They refueled in Oregon and Washington, and they refueled in Ensenada. And the legislature, however well-meaning, thought they could double the tax and the money would double, and they didn't. And my point is, as long as you have 25% of your general fund reliant solely on the income tax of the top 1%, you should not be surprised when that 1% decides to leave because they can save $100,000, $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year.
Okay, but
and they are leaving.
But does that, in a sense, does the flip side of that verify what Michael is saying, which is we're overly reliant on the income tax, and hence it's much higher than it should be because we're not getting value from property taxes like other states are.
Well,
I mean, that was also
in defense of Prop 13. First of all, it is factually correct that at 1% our property tax is lower than a lot of other states. It is also factually correct that house prices in California are significantly higher than in most other states. So you can't isolate one variable, say 1%, and then without looking at the bigger picture. The other point that tends to get lost.
But how many other states have Prop 13?
Well, Massachusetts has a variation of it, and a lot of states have had, after the Prop 13 revolt in 1978, a lot of legislators who didn't want to face an initiative made some property tax changes, but of course, as a statute, they can make changes themselves. Prop 13, property taxes are about the middle. They're not we're not the bottom of property tax collection. We're about the middle of all of the states. I don't know if this is an opportunity for me, but there's another issue I think we haven't talked about that should be on the table, and that is those folks who lobby the legislature, who have great influence, particularly corporations on one side, but the public employee unions, which we haven't talked about. And the comptroller just issued a report, I think it was yesterday or may even be coming out this morning, on the fact that we have $48 billion in potential debt for health care and retirement costs for public employee unions. So the ability of certain interests to affect the laws in the legislature add to the burden that we're discussing here today.
Well, Governor,
I want to. I'm sorry. I want to interject just one thing, since to beat the dead horse of the income tax. I always go back to a line that was written by Herb Stein, who was nobody would mistake for a Democrat. He was an economist who was head of Nixon's Council of Economic Advisors, and he wrote during a discussion of his era, and he's no longer with us, about what is the proper level of progressivity in an income tax system. He said he didn't know what the proper top marginal rate was in an income tax, but what he did know was that whatever it is, the people who pay that top marginal rate always think it's too high. Now, the point I'm making is that we can talk about Venus and Serena Williams, we can talk about Tiger Woods. We have an income tax in the state. There is no way we're going to keep people like that from declaring their home state to be a state that doesn't have an income tax, like Florida. We can't operate that way. We can't use these people as examples. The reason that companies come to California is not simply because they look at it and say, where are we going to pay the highest tax? They look at it and they say, number one, where's the biggest market? That's California. They say, where am I going to get the most educated workforce? It used to be California, and to go back to an old issue here. UC, Cal State University, was the glory of the state. It still is, but it is really on the edge. That's the sort of things. Those are the services, and those are the virtues that bring businesses to a state like California. They're not. A company leader, a CEO who makes a calculation based only on the marginal tax rate, the income tax, is not doing his company any favors, and he's not doing his company or shareholders.
I want to go around because we're down to the last couple minutes, and I want to have each one of you tell me what you think the most important steps are to be taken that could solve this problem, the long-term problem that we're facing here in California. Briefly. Joel, we'll start with you.
Okay, 3 quick steps. Make the business climate more friendly. Get the spending cap in place. I think at least those 2 measures will be very important. And I would also think a restructuring of the tax system, protecting Proposition 13 would be valuable as well.
Well, 1, you have to cap spending. 2, you have to look at the tax structure and recognize that it doesn't work as effectively as it could.
But looking at the tax structure is not a solution. Tell me what needs to be changed.
You have to find a way of spreading the burden. I haven't looked in great detail at what Governor Davis proposed, but we have a tax structure that is predicated on models that no longer exist. And you have to look at the regulatory burden in the state. The fact of the matter is you can't have employees without employers. And, with all due respect, Michael, employers aren't coming to the state. They're fleeing the state. And there's a whole series of reasons. Taxes are one component part of it. Lack of infrastructure is another component part of it. Liability reform, lack of liability reform is another part of it. I think California is on the precipice. When I was a kid, Detroit was one of the richest cities in America. It is not today because they made some very, very bad decisions. And what I do know is, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, a conservative or a liberal, if you are rational, you know that capital is amoral. It flows wherever it can get the greatest return on investment.
We've got to move on. I'm sorry. Governor?
Yeah, well, some of the things have already been covered, but in a structural sense, we do need to have a spending cap to curb the impulses of both parties to overspend. We do need to have a rainy day fund to help even out the peaks and valleys. I believe we need to have an open primary, greater participation, more debate, and I think a more candid discussion with the voters about the challenges before California. I also think we need to reduce the vote to pass a budget to
the supermajority rule
to about 55%. That's a supermajority, but an attainable majority.
Right.
I wouldn't change the vote to increase taxes. I think 2/3 should be left, but 4 out of 5 budgets don't increase taxes. Finally, and most importantly, look at what we do well. People in this state want to start their own business. They want to invent something new. I used to say America does 2 things well, innovation and finance. Now I say we do 1 thing well, innovation. And we do it best in California. And we do it through our university systems. That is the crown jewel of California, to keep research, innovation, new products, new medical discoveries. We need to become the leader, remain the leader, and provide American leadership in innovation.